What do you want? Enjoy the little things. You will never hear me say, not ever, that we don't need to be prepared. But there are times in history where you need to be prepared even more than others. And I believe that this is one of those times. Hello YouTubers, Alaska Prepper here. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not here to talk about the health crisis, but I just want to point something out that maybe many people aren't looking at. Here it says that the White House health crisis advisor accidentally drops the truth bomb about wearing face coverings, about the efficacy, about the effectiveness of wearing face coverings. And here he says, quote, "No study in the world that shows that face coverings work that well." And those of us that didn't go along to get along with the initial findings, we already knew that. Why is that? Because it says it right on the box. And I know this is an old issue, but it's going to go into something that I believe is more important than this, that will have even farther reaching ramifications on not only our environment, but our standard of living and our lives around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, where I'm getting at is that we take the word, or not we, most people take the word of governments without doing any research. I'll admit, I'm guilty. At first, when this thing first rolled out, I was taking every precaution possible. I was wearing a face covering. When I went to get water, I would make sure that I wore gloves, that I sprayed down the pump with bleach water and all that kind of stuff. I was right there with everyone else, but it didn't take very long to do a little research and to realize what the facts were and what we were being presented as being the facts. However, I digress. I want to talk about this right here. Geoengineering startup begins releasing sulfur particles into atmosphere in attempt to stop climate change. Now, just like that health crisis, these people that were in charge, they were making laws, rules, mandates, regulations, whatever you want to call it, right? Pretty rules for thee, but not for me. Just like that, where people did not understand what the second, third, fourth order effects were going to be of those rules that they passed during the health crisis. For example, now we are starting to realize, not only as a nation, but as a world, that the system in your body that is supposed to protect you against disease, it is now weakened because people were locked in their homes and not able to go outside. Because people were locked in their homes and not able to go to the gym to bring up their immunity, right? Because working out and staying physically active, getting sun, natural sun, it allows your system to work better in fighting disease. We're finding all of this stuff out now. And the people that made all of these rules that they themselves didn't follow, in my opinion, of course, they did not understand what the ramifications, what the second, third, fourth order effects of what they were passing by edict would be. So now we are looking at trying to stop sunlight from the sun entering and hitting the ground and providing us with the energy that the sun has always provided us. How do you think this is going to end? It's going to end quite badly. Especially now. This is kind of like oxymoronic, I guess you can say. Talking about this now after what's been happening across the world with this jet stream and with all of the cold weather that we've been having. I believe that all in all, it's kind of like a zero-sum game where some places in the earth is colder, while at the same time in some places in the earth is warmer. Where some places in the earth it's drier, where some places in the earth it's a lot more rainy and there's a lot more water, right? And we see that happen all over. I mean, look at Pakistan. They had a flood of a century where like 90% of their crops got wiped out. While at the same time here in the West, in the western part of the United States, we're having a 1,200-year mega drought where we are just not getting enough water to produce food, or enough food, right? But now it states here that in an interview with MIT Technology Review, Make Sunset's CEO, which is the company that's wanting to release this sulfur into the atmosphere in order to block the light from the sun, said that he expects to be characterized as a Bond villain for what the company is doing. But he insists that climate change is a threat, and that since the world is moving slowly to address the problem, a more radical solution is needed. A more radical solution, ladies and gentlemen, pretty much an ideology that is being used in order to further a certain group's agenda. That's exactly what it is, without really the scientific backup to ensure that, as I stated before, the second, third, fourth order effects are studied before this is put out into the wild, let's say. And he says here, and the thing is, this is an ideology. This is something that this person will always believe no matter what. They say here, it's morally wrong, in my opinion, for us to do nothing. What's important is to do this as quickly and safely as we can. And what I don't understand is how can one institution, one business, one 501c3, whatever it is, how can one institution decide what is good or not good for the entire world? Because this can be released from anywhere in the world, but it will affect the entire world. Now listen to this, ladies and gentlemen. I highlighted this in a different color so that I did not miss it. Here it says, he says, solar engineering must only be done by transparent democratic institutions, he insisted. Let me break that down. They're saying that a vote is all you need to change nature. That the science is not what you need. But if enough people vote and say, yes, let's go ahead and do this, even though this hasn't been studied, just like that last thing we gone through a couple of years ago, really wasn't studied before it was introduced into the public. And now you can probably see what's going on with your own eyes. I bet you that a lot of you probably have personal experience where maybe you've lost friends or family members. However, they haven't even studied what's going to happen once they do this. But since they're doing it through democratic institutions, it's okay. It's okay if 51% of the votes say that we can destroy our world, whereas the other 49% will just have to live with the ramifications of the actions that they're taking. Of course, on the behalf of good. But do they really know that it's good? Obviously, the last 2.5, 3 years has taught us that many of the people that were advocating for all of those mandates and forced, you know what I mean, that those things were not good. If not, they wouldn't be asking for amnesty now. Pretty much, they wouldn't be asking to be forgiven for what they did in the last couple of years. But it was all done democratically. Think about that. And here, thank goodness, is a counter to the fallacy that putting sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere is what we need, especially in a time that we are entering a cooling period. What many people don't understand is that, time, when you calculate time, geologically speaking, like through a long span of time, right now we are right in a little bit of a respite of an ice age. We're like in a 2,000-3,000 year respite of an ice age. There was an ice age before the time that we are living in now, and there will be an ice age afterward. And there is nothing that we can do about it. The only thing that we can do, ladies and gentlemen, is try to adapt to what's going on, because we're not going to change it. And if we try to change it, it probably will change, but for the worst. Nature always prevails. There's nothing that we little humans can do to change what nature has already decided that it's going to do. But here, thankfully, someone is opposing this, and it's someone of status. And they say that the current state of science is not good enough to either reject or accept, let alone implement solar geoengineering. To go ahead with implementation at this stage is a very bad idea. said Janos Pastor, executive director of the Carnegie Climate Governance Initiative. And he said this in an email to a media outlet. Solar engineering can have devastating consequences for human beings. Such attempts can end up altering the global hydrological cycle, affecting monsoon activity. This can affect agriculture and food security. And they're talking about doing this around now at a time that we are already having issues with food security, i.e. with agriculture. Reflecting sunlight to cool down the earth might also make people carelessly pump out more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Excessive CO2 can cause acidification of the oceans. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you already know how I feel about this CO2 thing, about this miraculous gas that's in the atmosphere that only takes up about 0.04% of all the gases in the atmosphere, and of which about 90% of that 0.04% that's in the atmosphere is induced naturally, meaning not by we, not by man, not by mankind. You will never hear me say, not ever, that we don't need to be prepared. But there are times in history where you need to be prepared even more than others. And I believe that this is one of those times. I mean, it's everything nowadays. Everything is going on. And let me tell you why I think that this era that we're living in has come to be. So much fear has been put out there that people are scared. And when people are scared, they look to authority. When people are scared that cannot take care of themselves, they look to authority. And it seems that in a democracy where the majority of the vote gets what they want, when you have the majority of the people afraid of almost anything, then things like this happen. Things like this pass. And it ends up hurting mostly those same people that asked for it. So that's why I'm asking you, don't be one of those people. Don't live your life in fear. Study a little bit of history and see what happens when a volcano spews ashes and sulfur into the air, into the atmosphere. What happens? The temperature drops. And is that what we need in a time when we're already having problems with agriculture? Now you see, these people here, these politicians in New York City, they have an agenda. And they're trying to implement policies in order to fulfill their agenda without thinking of the second, third, fourth order effects, even the first order effects in this case. New York City electric garbage truck plans hit a wall after the trucks conk out after just 4 hours, in a move that absolutely nobody could have seen coming. New York City is scrapping its brilliant idea for electric garbage trucks after finding out that the trucks simply aren't powerful enough to plow snow. Not only that, but they can't even last a full work shift, let alone. They say here that we found that they could not plow snow effectively. They basically conked out after 4 hours. Now, if you're wondering what are garbage trucks doing plowing snow, what they do is they refit them in the winter with plows so that they can also be used as snow plows as well as garbage trucks. They say here we need them to go for 12 hours, but they conked out after 4 hours. Given the current state of the technology, I don't see today a path forward, a fully electrifying the rear loader portion of the fleet by 2040. So they're pretty much saying that they won't even be able to do this by 2040, let alone now. And here they're spending almost a little over $500,000 per truck of taxpayer money. They say that we can't really make significant progress in converting our real loader fleet until the snow challenges are addressed. Do you think that snow is going to stop falling? Heck, if they go along with the plan that they initially had here of the article that I went over with spewing sulfur in the atmosphere, snow is not going to stop falling anytime soon. And so that you understand that they just do these things in order to fulfill their agenda, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to bring this back up. I've talked about this before. This article says how the new Cold War solved global warming. Here it says our attempt to punish the big R's economy for the invasion of the big U has taken precedence over saving the planet. If it's so important that we save the planet because we only have till 2029 before we're all erased from the face of the earth because of climate change, let's say, all right? Now, this is just my opinion, okay? My opinion. Then why in the world are we doing what we're doing now, making all these munitions? Do you know that the United States of America, the military of the United States of America, and I think it's the 5th, but I could be wrong by 1 or 2, but the United States military is the 5th largest polluter in the world, based on countries, based on nations. So the U.S. military actually pollutes more on an atom than several smaller countries combined. The shift is equally swift and absolute. The Germans are so desperate to avoid Russian gas and Russian pipelines that they are felling their own windmills to get at the coal underneath. And for a problem which is climate change, right? Which is what they say. For a problem of that magnitude, wouldn't you think that they would be more concerned with keeping their windmills up and not running any coals? And I'm not just picking on Germany, it's pretty much all of the West. Because for all of these years, we've been touting, yeah, we need windmills, we need solar panels. But now that it's not working, now they're plowing down their windmills, and now what are they doing? They're digging for their own resources, for coal, so that they can keep warm. Why? Because their plan failed. Why? Because they did not take a look at the second tertiary effects of all of these plans that they put into place years ago. And who suffers for that? The people suffer for it. Why? Because it's a democracy. Governance is no longer about the will of the people. It is about the will of the people that are in power, that are in that seat at their ivory tower. That is what governance is about, ladies and gentlemen. We're shifting back to a time where people want to be taken care of, where people want to look at a king and say, yes, take care of me, king. I love you. I'll do whatever you say. Why? Because people have been uneducated in the art of common sense. By what? By the education system. United States President Joe Biden is demanding oil companies produce more of what the world's most perilous substance is before February, which is oil. Why have we not cut down our consumption of oil? In the United States, we haven't cut down our consumption of oil. You know, we did during the health crisis, during the time that everyone was locked down, but we haven't really cut it down as a world, period. So we all live under the same dome. So why haven't we cut down our consumption of oil? We have all of these solar panels, we have all of these windmills and such, and don't get me wrong, I love solar panels, all right? I like solar panels. I think that is a great backup to what we have currently that can get you through a short crisis, and for some people, depending on how many they have, a longer crisis, right? Some people live off grid that don't need any of that stuff, but it still took energy in order to produce those solar panels that they have, in order to produce those batteries that store the power that is collected from the sun, right? So nothing wrong with solar panels, but we haven't really stopped using as much oil as we usually use. If any, maybe a very small amount, but not enough to make any difference in the amount of pollutants that go into the atmosphere. And that's exactly what it is. It's just a pollutant, right? It's not a world killer. You know, if you study history going back, you'll find that there were times throughout history where here in Alaska used to be tropical, where the North Pole sits now used to be like tropical jungle, used to be very warm. Well, what happened back then? Because this was millions of years ago. What happened back then for Alaska to get so warm that it was a tropical place? What happened for the North Pole to get so warm that it was a tropical place? What happened? Life happened. Nature happened. Things shift on their own all the time. But here we are trying to manage something that is unmanageable at the price of you, of your well-being, of your standard of living, of your freedom. I made this video way too long. I just want you to be awake and understand that all of these things that are going on now, they will have an effect on our standard of living, and that's why you must prepare. They will either have an effect on our standard of living because our wealth will be stolen at a faster rate than before in order for them to achieve their agenda or try to achieve it, or it will affect our standard of living, because the effects that all of these things that they're doing will have on nature will affect us greatly. Will give us less food, we'll have less energy. Energy equals life. Having said that, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you got something out of this. Main point, do your own research, because everything that they're telling you now can very well end up just like everything they were telling us several years ago, and look at where we're now with that. Have we progressed in any ways? Have a great day, ladies and gentlemen. God bless every one of you, and God bless America.